Written. Right, we're live. I'm gonna hit this button. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're gonna talk a little bit about a Skittles commercial. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we talk about games. But we also talk about movies. Frankly, we are more of a movies podcast this year. We have been doing all these Fast and Furious movies. The next 4 weeks are back to back releases, right? We got Mario Brothers, which is at least somewhat games related, right?
Yeah.
John Wick.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons, right? Also somewhat game related. So it's just like a million things coming right around the corner.
Yeah. And soon it'll be time for probably another Marvel movie. But we're talking about their Through a Mirror Darkly cousins in the DCEU. Right, that's the other movie that's coming out soon is The Flash. With
yes.
Because Ezra Miller wasn't controversial enough, they gave us two Ezra Millers.
Weirdly, way more talked about movie than Shazam. I feel like Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I don't even know that it's here. No one is talking about it. There's no fucking commercials, right? I feel like I didn't see a single trailer for it. It just is here. Oh, sure, it's here. It's making the box office to match, which is to say not a lot. Pretty dismal showing, all things considered. I guess that's what you get when you put out a gigantic movie and don't market it at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, it's weird because I would see previews for it at the theater, right? Like it would show up in front of other movies, but like outside of that, right? Like friend of the cast Zhao linked an article that was from The Onion that was basically we can confirm that Shazam has come out, and that the whole joke is that that it was released, right? But yeah, let's give our pre-spoiler impressions. What did you think of this movie?
I just kind of thought it was fine. There's I wouldn't go to bat for this movie in any meaningful sense, but just to describe, maybe I just went into this in a weird way. I watched it at 10:30 at night, completely empty theater, right? And I don't know, I just got sort of swept up in some of the emotionality of it all. I cried 3 times, which was very just I don't know. It reminds me of the first Shazam. There was a real big gut punch in there, sort of this emotional gut punch. And there were a couple of them in here that were very similar, right? Just spots that tugged on the old heartstrings and they got me. And I don't know, it was just sort of fun. It's pretty stupid. It was pretty dumb in a plot sense. I was never really I don't know. I feel like I'm saying that a kids movie is predictable. It's sort of not the point, But the plot was just kind of whatever. The villains were pretty bad, all things considered. They were okay, They were enough, C- villains basically. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I did not feel like I wasted my money. There you go. That's the best endorsement that I could possibly give.
All right, I am significantly worse on the movie. I thought it was. I'm with you on that kind of it's fine aspect up until basically the final act, at which point I think it just falls off a cliff. I referenced it at the beginning of this podcast, but there's a moment that really, really soured me on it. And I think put me through the look.
Oh my God. I remember thinking that moment, I was like, Mango's going to hate this. I didn't think he would take the whole movie, but I legitimately thought at the time, I was like, you are going to fucking hate this.
Yes, but also it's also when I think that the problems with the plot start really snowballing into something that really aggravates me. It just it was. I felt like it lacked any kind of the little pieces, right? I don't think the through line they were going for worked. I don't think there was the character development went in the direction they wanted it to. There were also some very weird moments. There were some impactful moments, sure, but at once they kind of hit that big kind of final battle scene that comprises the last third of the movie, I just thought it was not like the characters were like in some ways too stupid to be believable, and also like there were just like other things that were happening that were like nonsensical. Um, and that bothered me. And I don't like despise this movie like I have some other movies, right? But let's like I was just like so after the first post credit scene, which I also really despised. I thought that was really bad. I don't hold that against the movie because like post credit scenes or whatever. I got up and then I saw everyone else who was like, "Oh, there's a second one of these, isn't there?" And I was contemplating just walking out because I didn't care. And I was like, and for you people out there, I sat and watched it, and it wasn't worth it. That second post credit scene was absolutely again not a, like I disliked the post credit scenes. But like I don't hold like that is not why I am against this movie. It's just notable that like I don't think they were worth waiting after for. But yeah, all right, we're gonna hit the spoiler section, I guess. Yeah. All right.
Sure.
Spoilers ahead for primarily Shazam 2, perhaps Shazam 1. Also any other DCEU properties. So if you are interested in seeing this movie or any related properties, get out now. 3, 2, 1. All right. So, where do you want to start with this?
I don't super know. I guess I'm interested in this, in the thing sort of breaking down in the back half, because I do feel you. In terms of like raw plot and stakes and all of that sort of stuff, I do think that this kind of hits that, somebody in an article a couple of years ago talked about like third act mush, which is this idea that basically since the Avengers, right, we've sort of had this issue of third acts just kind of become super CGI punch fests, right? And everything just like, it feels like I'm watching an actor's face float around in front of a green screen. And that's sort of where all semblance of plot and character and story sort of like fall apart, right? There aren't real stakes. You don't have a sense of real goals. There's not a plan, right? That people are trying to, like enact or whatever. It is just, can I punch enough guys, to sort of win for 30 minutes. And I sympathize with third act mush quite a lot. I think a lot of movies have problems with third act mush, right? But I think a lot of movies don't, right? So for instance, what would be a good example of not third act mush? Man of Steel. You know what? Let's just go to the easy place. Man of Steel is not third act mush because it very clearly lays out the plan for what these characters are going to accomplish, right? And then it follows kind of traditional storytelling stakes, right? Which is the twist in the third act kind of happens halfway through. The twist in the third act is that Zod does not get sucked into the exploding black hole in the center of the Black Zero, right? And he's on the ground. And now Superman has to 1v1 Zod through the streets of Metropolis, ultimately culminating in him snapping his neck, right? That's like a very traditional sort of approach to sort of third act stakes. I think the third act mush that has come about, Ant-Man would be a really good example actually of third act mush, is just when there's a lot of like nameless, faceless goons that are just being batted away, right? When Shazam was doing third act stuff that was, all the stuff, for instance, in the dome, right? At the very end of the movie, there's this dome over Philadelphia. He makes a deal with one of the gods to shrink the dome to just be over the Phillies stadium, where Shazam shoots lightning inside of the dome, and the lightning is ricocheting everywhere. And he's fighting a dragon, right? He's just going one toe to toe with this dragon. That stuff was great. That worked for me, right? But there was just before that and outside of all that, there's this thing of they plant a tree in the fucking stadium and the tree does roots everywhere, and then popping out of the roots are all of these mythical Greek monsters like harpies and manticores and the Cyclops and the Minotaur. And like, I actually sort of like the idea of that, but it is the truest third act mush I've ever fucking experienced in my life, right? They are there for a couple of scenes. They do essentially nothing. There's one minor plot point that takes place, and then this thing is wrapped up off screen you know, like there's no follow up to it. You just watch them chase these monsters off, and then eventually they sort of like fade out of existence later. And I was just like, this this means zero to me. This added nothing to the movie, right? I just wish that we were dealing with the big stuff that mattered, right? And I feel like that's sort of where I'm at when it comes to this third act stuff on like a plot level.
So I agree with you in kind of like form, but not like I don't think the dome stuff was particularly good. There was some stuff in there that like bothered me and kind of like this kind of like, you know, it skates the line between like this is kind of nitpicky and also like this is too dumb for me to forgive, right? Like um the only I will say did get some joy out of the tree, just because I hate Philadelphia and it was nice to see it destroyed. But
Oh my
yeah,
god.
yeah, that's right, Philly, you suck. But you know that's more of like a meme response for me, right? But like like I was already formulating the jokes in my head is like oh Shazam's the villain because he's keeping the terrible city of Philadelphia from being destroyed. But the memes aside, I just like Lou says next play the stream title. I have titled the stream Philadelphia deserved it. So.
Damn, go easy. My father-in-law is from Philadelphia, all right, and he loves the Eagles. Okay, he loves the King of Prussia Mall and his water ice fountains.
um, but yeah, but yeah, no. Like I said, memes aside, like I agree with you entirely. The monsters were just kind of like whatever, right? Like, again, this also leads to like I said, my probably single least favorite part of this movie is the part that is literally a Skittles commercial, right? Like, we find out through means that the way that, the things that the monsters are scared of are unicorns, right? And unicorns like dark caves and ambrosia, because unicorns aren't like sparkly unicorns; they are like, they are dark, bad
Badass unicorns. Yeah.
unicorns. And and the little girl member of the team is like, I like unicorns, and she doesn't care. And then when they face down the unicorn, she throws fucking Skittles at it because Skittles are just like ambrosia. And she says, "Taste the rainbow, motherfucker!" At one point, that gets like comedically cut off for like funny censorship reasons. And I was so fucking mad. Like, I would not have minded if like the Skittles were like a little thing. The fact that it was so clearly an ad place, right? Like it wasn't product placement, it was an ad, and that's what bothered me, right? Like this is like freaking the girl could have like turned to the camera and said, "We'd like to thank Skittles like for bringing this movie to theaters," right? Like like a YouTube video or something, and it would have been less out of place than it was in the actual movie.
Yeah, I have complicated feelings about this because I actually do like the pop culture references that the movie makes, right? There's a part, for instance, elsewhere in the movie where Shazam, says, because I've watched all the Fast and Furious movies. You know what those movies are about? Family, right? That's in the trailers, right? That is inoffensive. It's fine. It's fine, right? Because I do think we kind of live in this pop culture saturated world, right? Where like you can make these sorts of references because it's the way that people talk, right?
Sure.
Like those sorts of memes don't kind of bother me. But yep, the Skittles thing I think was bad. It was frankly, I think that whole sub little plot was awful. I was like, this is the worst like stealing focus bullshit that I could like possibly think of. But they I don't know, they went for it. I basically hated all of that stuff. I hated the battle wagon, thing that crashed into a minotaur. They have like all these bits. I don't want to punish the movie too much for having its bits because I think that's part of the charm, right? It's a pretty memey, jokey movie, all things considered. I don't mind that whatsoever. But like all of that stuff is really when it started to grate on me. And kind of took its toll, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no, and I also like it being a jokey movie is fine, but there are a couple of moments that like really kind of like tore me out of it. The first one was relatively early on when the villain like name's like Constance or something, one of the sisters.
Calypso, I think.
Calypso, thank you.
Yeah.
Like causes a a good a teacher to walk off a roof and commit suicide, right? Like that was fucking rough, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, there's no way they let that happen, and then they let it fucking happen. And she talks about him popping like a grape. I'm like, what the fuck, right? Like that is like, that's like not the attitude I was getting from this movie. And like again, like that was fine, but like the other half, but this is the one that bothers me more is at the end of the movie, Shazam, Billy Batson dies, right? Or like we are led to believe he dies, and I didn't believe it for even like a quarter of a second, right? Like I was like and they bury him. I'm like, are they just gonna like do a Superman again? Because like there was no way they let him die. And then they have Gal Gadot. Like this is another minor thing that like just bothered me because I could tell. It's like Gal Gadot, who is clearly never on set with anybody else in the cast, right? Like her part was clearly filmed entirely separately and like edited together with the rest of the cast, right? Like which was funny in the first movie, in the post-credit scene, where Superman was like neck up, right? Like I thought that was funny, or neck down rather. And in his dream, where you're just seeing the back of Wonder Woman, right? Because then you just use a like. I thought that was all pretty funny, but this last one was like because they lampshaded it so hard. I feel like I was primed to notice that she wasn't actually on set with them, right? Like, and I think that just like kind of undercut the moment in a way that I thought if she was actually there, right? Like in it would have been wrong. Maybe I'm a little too sensitive to that because like we've been like doing this podcast for like 6 or 7 years now, and I notice these kinds of things. Maybe your average viewer doesn't notice it, but like I feel like her clearly not being on set with them just undercut that whole moment.
It's interesting. The thing that bothered me about that moment, and actually, frankly, sucked the hardest in this whole movie, was the music, right? Because they use, and I hate that I'm about to complain about this because I actually like this thing quite a lot, right? One of the things I think sucks the most about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is its music, because every movie doesn't respect its own sort of leitmotifs. Leitmotifs being like a story-based phenomenon of a musical sort of like a melody or like a musical phrase that is associated with a noun, essentially, right? Like a person or place or a thing. Wonder Woman has that. She has that crazy cello thing that Hans Zimmer wrote in 2016 for Batman vs Superman, which is like epic and awesome and super great. And then it would later show up again in the Wonder Woman movie, which was perfect, right? It frames it's like, oh, this is this is the Wonder Woman theme, right? My problem with that moment was they didn't to like back up a second. The thing about the leitmotif that makes it a leitmotif is the recognizable melody, right? If I were to hum, for instance, the Force theme, right? The Twin Suns, the Binary Sunset, that Force theme, right? That is a musical phrase that shows up a bunch in Star Wars, but it crucially shows up in very different forms, right? So, for instance, I was, for dumb reasons, watching Attack of the Clones again, and there's a moment where Anakin and Obi-Wan are about to split up, where Anakin's going to go with Padme, Obi-Wan's going to go chase after Jango Fett, where Anakin is walking away, and Obi-Wan says, "Anakin, may the Force be with you." And they kind of smile. Yeah, they've been a little contentious, but they kind of smile at one another. These, these are friends saying goodbye. And he says, "May the Force be with you." And then the theme plays, right? But it doesn't play with those big horns, right? It plays in a very small, very light violin, right? Just kind of underlying that whole that whole thing, right? When Wonder Woman shows up in this solemn, super like emotional moment as they bury Billy Batson, who has given his life for the people of Philadelphia, right? They use the full bore maximum volume distorted electric cello version of the Wonder Woman thing, and it was the most dissonant possible thing you could have done to throw me out of that scene. Right? If you wanted to use the leitmotif, that's fine, but like have the timbre of the music match the intentions and like the emotional state of the scene itself, because otherwise you are just cooking up some rancid vibes. Is there that was my thing about Wonder Woman and everything else.
Yeah.
Though weirdly, that was also a place that I cried. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I do kind of want to go back to this kind of like last scene in the dome with the lightning bolts.
Sure.
Just because like, like again, little stuff that like bothered me, but ultimately probably isn't a deal breaker. Is like, why is he flying straight at the fucking dragon? Right? Like he does like duck underneath the dragon at one point. It's like, why are you not doing that the entire time? Right? Like, I also thought that like they burn his outfit pretty crispy. I'm like, oh, is there going to be like a Black Adam thing here? None of that in there. But like, as she's dying, the oldest sister, like I can't remember her name either.
Hespera.
Hespera, yeah, Hespera. Hespera, says a true god after all. I'm like, where did that come from? Like, there's nothing in the text or even in like, I guess the like, there's nothing here that like makes that line make any sense, right? And again, not a huge deal, but it's like one of these things that kind of like starts building up, and it's like I feel like this movie's gone over a cliff that I don't think it can recover from. Like
yeah, you just can't climb back up there. You're plummeting like the bus in Fast and Furious 6.
Yeah. Like so like clearly part of this.
That's 7, I guess. Right. Ramsey is 7. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's 7.
It's 7. Yeah. So part of this is like this movie I think is supposed to borrow a phrase, rhyme like poetry with the first one, right? The first one's about Billy learning to trust other people and place his faith in other people, and that they won't always let you down. This movie is about him, ostensibly about him believing in himself and his own competency and not constantly trying to delegate out to others. But I don't really get enough of that, like that's kind of like muddled with this other thing about like, you can let people go and like, I feel like the themes were like very muddled and not very well developed, and like not like. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like maybe I'm not giving enough of its due, but like it felt like one of the themes was supposed to be like you always defer to the older sister Megan, maybe. Mary, yes, thank you. Sorry, as you can tell, I'm not great with the names of characters in any of these movies.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Like he always defers to Mary on what to do because he doesn't, I guess, believe in himself enough. Although he is trying to like run this like very kind of like big project manager energy with his like postmortems with the TV screen, right? Like, and I enjoyed that for like comedic beats, but it's like it's simultaneous like I think the movie wants us to think like he's like growing into his role as kind of like the leader of the Philadelphia fiasco, right? Like, or but like it doesn't like really sell that to me. It also like feels like he was like kind of trying to do that in some instances, but also like it just didn't feel like a good arc that like made coherent sense to me. You how do you feel about it?
I guess I sort of see what you're getting at. Really, the thing that I connected with, that made it so meaningful. There's 2 pieces that was so meaningful. One was Billy. So it's kind of this like 1, 2, 3 of Billy feeling imposter syndrome, being told by the wizard directly, like, I fucked up by picking you. I should not have picked you, right? And then in the parking lot, the wizard actually going, you know what? I was correct to pick you because I was too miserly with this power, right? You have given it to your family unconditionally because you unconditionally love them, and that's great. That's just like really nice or whatever. That worked completely well for me. But the moment there that really hit me was when there's a lot of like unconditional, effortless acceptance in this movie, I guess, was when he was like, and like, I know that I turn 18 in 5 months and I'm going to age out of the program or whatever. And his mom was like, shut the fuck up. Like, I'm your mom. You're staying with us. Don't even think about that. And I just couldn't, I like bawled. I like couldn't handle just how it wasn't just that she said it because I was expecting her to say it, right? They set this up with this thing
Yeah.
where he calls her Rosa. He doesn't really call her mom, right? That this kind of thing. Um, but it was just the way in which she was just like, there was no art. It was so obvious that that it was almost funny that she had to say something. And there's something about that that just like hit me where I fucking lived. But really, what it comes down to for me is this thing with him and the wizard, right? When the wizard says, like, I couldn't find anyone to give the power to, and then I gave it to you, and you found that everyone around you was worthy of this was like worthy of this power. I thought that was great. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I get that, and I think that that's like I think it's a decent moment, but I don't think the rest of the text really like builds to that moment in a way that like makes sense, right? Because like that moment, like so that's like the one thread, right? That like the wizard is having regrets or whatever, right? But that always like that moment says to me that like Billy Batson was always correct. Whereas like the arc of this movie wants to be that Billy Batson needs to grow in some way, right? And wants to tell you that he's grown, but doesn't really sell that to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
On like the family moment, I get that, and I felt myself like feeling like teary-eyed at it, but I also felt like it was super emotionally manipulative. And I was like there was the part of me that was like physically reacting to it, but there was my brain part was like this is like really like rough, right? Like in like kind of like this is really kind of like you said, it's very obvious, and that to me felt like it was just kind of like trying to like just yank on the lever rather than do it with any sort of like artfulness or
Yeah, it's like the thing I always my benchmark for this is Inside Out. There's this imaginary friend character like Bobo or whatever, the fucking
the
pink
clown,
elephant guy. Yeah, and it's like that character has never worked for me. Mostly actually because Rachel pointed this out to me. She was just like, it was just from the moment he existed, he was there to tug on your heartstrings and then be killed off so that
Right.
you'd feel sad about it. And that like broke the mechanism such that I couldn't feel anything. I was just like, fuck you, movie, trying to force me to feel feelings, right? Like that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because like there's some stuff that I buy in on and some stuff that I doesn't. It's funny because Shazam is kind of a good sort of like I don't think there's any bad filmmaking. There's only sort of bad executions of different filmmaking tools, if that makes sense. So for instance, I might say that bathos humor in certain Marvel movies undercuts it. Like undercuts the story and the plot to the point that it ruins the movie for me. But this is a good example of there's a lot of bathos humor that I think is pretty legitimately funny, and that is like not, it doesn't take me out of the fourth wall, right? Like they do this whole bit that I thought was just genuinely really funny, where they have this pen who writes down everything that they say, and they're dictating to the pen, but they're dictating a ridiculous message, and then you watch Helen Mirren read this out, trying to comprehend what they were saying. It's like that's funny. That's just like a good bit, and I feel
thought it
like
went on for a couple too few. It went on a little bit too long, but yeah, I will say yeah. I think it works. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, and so there's some stuff that on this like emotional level that I feel like was like that for me, where it was fine. I think the other thing that got me was Billy's sacrifice at the end. They specifically do this thing where he's in the rubble, right? And Freddy gets like down next to him and is like, this is the part, like, wake up, this is the part where you wake up, which is in a weird way, it's not Bathos humor, it's like Bathos tragedy in a way,
right?
Because it is him sort of projecting his understanding of how these sorts of stories work, and that got me. I was like, oh my god, he's just dead. He doesn't do the cuff cuff. I always loved you. He's
It's
just
about
dead.
time.
Yeah. There's just none of that. He is literally just fucking dead. And then they cut to him in a grave, and I was like, no, oh my god. And I was like, there's no way this is real. Absolutely, he's coming back to life. I'm sure that something is gonna happen. And I had like 40 different thoughts about the thing that was going to bring him back to life. Not one of them, by the way, was that Wonder Woman would actually show up
Yeah, I was
to
saying like this is a minor
zap him
plot
back to
point, but
life.
does like
Yeah.
Wonder Woman have like the power of resurrection, right? Like I'm willing to like let that go. Like this is like a very nitpicky point, but it's kind of like happens, and it's like, wait, what? Like did he like? It seems like he actually fucking died there, right? Like
Okay, so to explain it, because this was my interpretation, is that the staff has the power to turn you has the power to suck your Shazam powers back, but or also grant them to you, right? And with no gods, you can't use the staff to turn him into Shazam, right? Which would bring him back to life theoretically. But then Wonder Woman is a god, and she does do that. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
That was my like cursory read. I frankly don't think this matters, and I also think that it's sort of dumb. Like this is one of the things where the movie definitely lost me. Is this all this stuff between like gods and mortals or whatever? I like that as a plot point. I think the idea of mortals who have slain their gods or are in this kind of conflict with their gods, all that stuff is super fun, right? You know, like half of my D&D campaigns are built around a concept not all that dissimilar to this. But you know, for this one, I don't know. It was just kind of whatever, which I think is a good segue into the villains who basically sucked. I like that they had personalities,
yeah,
which was nice. You know, one of the things that I think is attractive about the pantheon of gods that are in like Greek or North mythology is that they have all of these kind of, you know, like they have these big personalities that are kind of like in conflict with one another. And it was nice that Hespera and Calypso and Anthea were all working on the same side, but for reasons that were like unique, and they had different approaches to these things, which ultimately broke down their kind of alliance and got, you know,
yeah.
their it like foiled their sort of like villain plot or whatever. Though I will say that they are super lame and forgettable, and I just wish that they did something cool with them. Like Shazam has a lot of fun villains, and it sucks that we didn't get any of those.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought like the idea that like actually maybe Hespera has a point, right? Like, and you know, and like on her own, the power isn't like the plan isn't actually that. It's not even like that evil. Other than you know, like she turned a bunch of people to stone, right? Like that's obviously very bad. But like her ultimate plan is not to destroy Earth. Her ultimate plan is to restore her realm, and like that's maybe understandable at some level. Um, and then Calypso undercutting all that. That makes sense to me. That reads pretty well to me. There were a couple like the things I will say about them is I thought Anne's powers were pretty cool. Didn't get to use them much. And then like this is like the Prometheus complaint, right? Like you know, a Calypso shoots a beam at Anne and she zooms away, and then she like doesn't step a foot to her left and gets hit by the beam anyway, right? Like, that's like that was like troublesome to me. The other thing that like was like a bit this is maybe a little bit delicate, but there is a scene where they talk about how Anne is actually 6,000 years old, and within like 10 seconds she kisses the guy that's under 18, right? Like
Are we doing this discourse? Are you going to tell me that it's not a pedophilia, it's a phebophilia or whatever?
I mean, like that aside, right? Like that's just it's like it's the reason this like sticks in my craw a little bit is like we've just gone through another round of like Leonardo DiCaprio dating 20-year-olds. It's not a great, you know, it's not great, it's not a great look, right? Like, and like, yeah, I get it, it's fiction, but it's also kind of like it wouldn't have bothered me so much if it wasn't directly adjacent to the reveal, right? Like it was literally like 10 seconds later, right? And that did bother me a little bit, just because it was like, you know, she is 6,000 years old, right? Like, you know.
Oh wait, does it bother you that she is 6,000 years old, or that they brought it up?
It bothers me that her like it bothers me that they make a point of it, and then they have them kiss anyway, right? like, and they do it in close temporal proximity, right? Like,
Okay, yeah.
right? Because like,
I definitely feel that. I maybe used to entertain these sorts of thoughts a little bit too much, but frankly, I don't give a fuck. Right? Like this reminds me of like Twilight, when people used to go after Twilight because Edward is 100 years old, even though he's like the body and of a
sure,
17-year-old. So he just like goes to a million different high schools or whatever because he never ages. Fucking vampire. And like this was a really common way to attack the Twilight series, was to sort of like be like, oh, Edward is a I don't know, like a fucking
groomer.
pedophile, a groomer, whatever. And I just think it's, I don't know, I have like very little patience for this line of reasoning. It's very like imposing a certain set of moralistic beliefs on a like story that don't deserve to be there, really, is I guess what I would like,
Sure.
how I would go after that, right? It's like, if the story says that it's fucking fine that he has that, then it's fine. Like get over yourselves, right? Like it's you know what, actually, okay, I'm sorry. You know what it reminds me of? Hold on. The best version of this is the fandom wars in The Last Airbender. I promise this makes sense, okay? So, two huge ships in that show. You have I don't know what they're, is it Katang? Aang and Katara, right? The core couple, right? Aang, the Avatar protagonist character, Katara, they have the most will they want they or whatever. But the biggest like versus ship is Zutara, which is Zuko and Katara. Okay, which by the way, this is the better ship. All right, I'll just plant my fucking flag here, right? And there's this weird thing that people do when they are attacking that Zutara ship, where they go, Zuko is from the Fire Nation, and the Fire Nation are fascist colonizers, right? So the Zutara ship is endorsing fascist imperialism, and it's just like, what the, I just want to see him kiss, okay? You know what I mean? It's like, we don't have to do any of this stuff. And I feel like that's exactly where I want to be when it comes to, I don't fucking care. She's played by an 18-year-old. He's played by an 18-year-old. She's like, who cares? I could not give a less of a fuck about this. Which is why I wish the movie just like didn't even bring it up at all, right?
So, if they left it implied, or like if she mentioned that she was 6,000 years old and then at the end of the movie they kissed, it wouldn't have been a thing to me. It's the fact that she mentions it within like I said, within like 10, less, I'm pretty sure it's less than a minute they kiss, is the thing that feels weird to me, right? Like, just don't place them that close together, right? Because like, I don't know, that kind of like, and then like they also like joke about it too at the end. It's like, what is it with our boys and older women, right? Like, it just feels like, so there's like a sliding scale, right? Like there's the one end, which is like what you're talking about. I think I'm totally with you on that with like the Zutara thing. Then there's like the other end where like you might like, I don't know. It's weird because like no one would do this because it would be like you could theoretically portray like a romance between like an actual abuse, like manipulative pedophilic relationship, and portray it in a good light, and that would be like, that would send everybody off the deep end, right? Like like no one would like you do a you do something like that.
Yeah, okay. So I know what you mean. If we were to cast a movie where Tom Cruise is dating Zendaya, right? We would probably say, all right, like this has gone too fucking far, okay? Right? He is 40 years older than she is, right? This is like not okay anymore.
Yeah, and the movie also doesn't present it as controversial. It's like, oh yeah, that's totally fine, right? Like, and like,
yeah. Like it is like in Top Gun 3, there is a side plot where he is like fucking some 18-year-old. It's like obvious. Yeah, we would all agree that that's bullshit and wrong. Yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and so like, in this like weird middle ground, right? Like you said, normally it's not a problem. It's the fact that they drew attention to it so close to its execution is what bothered me. And again, this is not like this is not why I hate the movie, right? Like, or this is not why I dislike the movie. Because I also don't want to say I hate the movie because it's not like that strong. I just like, I don't know. Kind of is like, I probably should have said this before the spoiler mark, but I don't feel like, I feel like I wasted my time. Maybe not my money, right? But like, it was just kind of like, I will never think about this movie again. Um, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah, especially because it's like destined to be thrown in the ground,
yeah,
right? We're burying this movie under heaps and heaps of dirt and we're never resurrecting it again because it made no money. I don't know. If they do execute on a Justice Society concept, you could convince me. I like the Justice Society and I like the interactions around the Justice Society that we got from Black Adam. Both these movies didn't really perform all that well, but who knows with James Gunn up top. This I guess I would say the original post-credit scene seems to be a late addition after James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios, right? Which is a good sign because boy oh howdy are DC the champions of post-credit scene that go fucking nowhere. Okay, right? But I don't know. The idea that maybe some of this stuff comes out the other end and we have a good a real Justice Society movie, I would be pretty happy about that.
yep, I can see that. I thought that scene was like pretty fucking cringy. Like, if that's like the level of humor that we're gonna get out of all of the James Gunn projects, I want to die
Okay,
right
yeah,
now.
so we haven't watched Peacemaker. My understanding is those are two characters from
Well, yeah,
the Peacemaker TV show,
they're
right?
two characters from the Suicide Squad movie. Like, they were
Oh, are they?
they were
Oh
the
my
guys.
God, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes. Then yeah.
and like, I think that kind of stuff kind of like, it's like two different types of humor that are like clashing up against each other and not really working with each other is maybe like what I'm seeing here, right? Also, I see that like Shazam was being way too like dumb in this scene.
Yeah. I liked him quite a lot. I think he threads a really tough needle, to be honest with you, Zachary Levi specifically, of playing this like, I don't know, like ADD teenager in an adult's body. That was something I was like really surprised at how I feel like that would normally suck. Under most circumstances, I think this would be really bad. But you need a really good, talented actor to sort of like make it work. Not Forrest Gump. Big would be a good example of this, right? Like Tom Hanks, right? We would all agree Tom Hanks is a great actor, right? Really sells the kid in an adult body that came in Big, and Zachary Levi is doing a very similar sort of. So that's yeah.
I honestly, my own take is I want like a solo Freddie Freeman movie because I like Freddie Freeman better than Billy Batson.
Oh, interesting.
Like I was like, a thing I was thinking while watching the first movie is like, how is this guy not the guy that gets the powers, right? Like the guy, like the guy that's walking around with the crutch, right? Like, this is like a cosmic injustice, right? That like, and I think he's like I think he has like a better character arc in this movie. Not that he has like a ton of one, but like I think he's a more compelling character than Billy Batson. Especially like in this movie, Billy Batson doesn't have a lot going against him other than like his kind of own insecurities, which is a fine thing to tackle, but it's not like, it's not like he has like any external problems. Freddie Freeman's the only one that does, right? Like, he's bullied at school and he's got issues. He's got the issue of like, living with a disability, and and he's got this arc with this girl who like likes him for who he is, despite the fact that he's that he's disabled. And I think that's all great. And I think Billy's stuff just like doesn't really like resonate. It's also kind of told to us, right? Like, there's a scene in the psychologist's or the pediatrician's office where he's like, my mom abandoned me, and and my dad abandoned me, and and the system has failed me, and everything's terrible. And that's like kind of all we get of his actual kind of turmoil, right? Everything that's shown to us is just kind of like goofy and not really like.
Yeah, but that's like a recap of the first movie, right?
Right.
The first movie is very much about his abandonment issues, includes all that subplot
Sure.
of like him finding his mom and getting rejected.
Sure, no, absolutely. But like, it's also like, like that's supposed to be his motivation for why he's like not doing so well. I feel like it doesn't like it, none of that like feels real to me in this movie, right? It just feels kind of like it feels more told than shown. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of him like not dealing with things because the other part of this is like, you know, they're called the Philadelphia Fiascos, but like it's made pretty apparent to us that this is like Philadelphia being a shitty city, right? Which I'm all for, right? It's like Philadelphia blaming them for like not being perfect, despite like
Oh, I mean, I hate all of this. This is like Civil War, right? Where it's like somehow you are morally culpable for the people you failed to save, right? Or like the Man of Steel thing, right? People, it's like Superman should have saved those people. It's like no. The stakes of this movie is that it is hard. He is trying his best, but like there's only so much he can do when facing off against this fucking super soldier, essentially, right? And so, yep, I agree with you 100%, and that bugged the fuck out of me. I don't think there's any way any story could ever do this that would not make me furious at this point, because it's just like, it is so ethically dumb. It's so dumb. It's just so dumb, right? That it bothers me to no end.
yeah, right. Like and like I think there's a way to do it, but like you have to have like an actual failing there, right? Like, you know, um uh like if they had like if they had focused on repairing the bridge and that failed and people died as a result, right? That's too dark for this movie, or maybe not, since they walked a teacher off the top of a school. But like, you know, that type of thing, like, or like it's like an error in judgment, right? Like,
Yeah.
like that sort of thing could like, but this is literally like they did the best they could and it wasn't enough. Rebrand to some Ghost Hate Killing Word.
That's gonna be our April Fool's episode. Okay.
Um,
Yeah, no, I feel and like I think other movies have done this in, you know, like for instance, this is something I wish Aquaman did, because the comics do it and it is great. But we talked about this when we were reviewing Aquaman, how the whole thing about him and Black Manta's dad is kind of like drawn out in this way that becomes very awkward, right? Where in the comics, he literally murders Black Manta's dad because he thinks Black Manta killed his own dad and he was furious about it, right? And also, he's not really like a superhero. He's just like a guy at that point. This is before he's like truly Aquaman or whatever. But it's just like, man, have him whip that spear thing after he gets grenaded because he's Aquaman and he's being an arrogant idiot, and then kill him with that thing, and it would work so much better for all of this other sort of stuff. I definitely feel you can do this thing of heroes who make mistakes and are morally culpable for them, right? But I will just never in a million years be sold on this. You know, something bad happened and you showed up to save everyone, but you only saved 99% of people. It's like,
I mean, and you
fucking shoot me.
you can also do that for motivation for villains, because like Aquaman doesn't feel, or Aquaman, I don't know, it's been too long since I've seen the movie. But
Well,
Aquaman,
okay, so that is his arc. At first, he doesn't feel responsible, but then later on, he has a conversation with Mira where he's like, because this is his arc. This is
Right.
he needs to learn to take responsibility. This is why I like
Sure,
Aquaman. And it's like I didn't think that I needed to do that, but now it made this person hate me, and he's attacking people I love because of it. Right? That's on me. That's my responsibility, and I fucked up. It's like, okay, that completes like a real arc. But it doesn't. I don't know. It's just a fucking joke here, and I just hate it so much because the premise of the joke is so fucking stupid.
right. No, and like, but like that's also supposed to be part of this motivation for like Shazam feeling like he's fucked up, right? Like that he's not like doing his job right, and that he's a failure because like, you know, I think we're supposed to feel like he feels like he's a failure because of it, even, but like it's, I don't know, it feels, you know, and maybe I can get on the inside of like, you know, even if it isn't his fault, he's still gonna feel that way. But because it's such like a bad trope that gets trotted out again and again, it doesn't resonate with me. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's
yeah.
all I had to say about Shazam. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Like, give me 1 second, because I think there might be another little thing in there.
Okay, one cool thing I want to mention while I'm vamping. The dragon whose breath weapon is like pure fear is sweet. It wasn't really used to its fullest potential, in my opinion. But I was just like, this wood dragon with fear breath or whatever. I'm on board for that. I thought that was cool.
That is a cool idea. That's like a steal it for a D&D campaign idea.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't think I got anything else there. I just want to reiterate my hate for that fucking Skittles commercial.
Skittles moment. There were a couple of other moments that I was just like, boy, that is some product placement.
There was like the I think it was a PlayStation placement. I only knew it was PlayStation because in the end credits they put like the triangle, square, circle, cross in like on like the the dude's body. I will say that this movie did sell me on the fact that these are the same characters, because like there was a moment where I was like, why are they going through all the actors again? It's like, oh, because there were two sets of actors for the same characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually that's something else I think that the movie does really well is like that blend between the two actors. You always feel like the other version is still the same brain, just in this adult body or whatever, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to give props to Zachary Levi because, like you said, he's like the one that's all focused on. And then I know what the actress's name is, but the actress that plays the little girl's grown up form like does a great job of like being a little girl in an adult's body.
Yep.
But yeah, no, leave it there.
Okay, well, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. There you go. Rest in peace, pepperonis. I guess we'll see you again in Justice League. Probably not. Justice Society. Whatever. It's fine.
Rest in piss.
Yeah, rest in piss. Tell me about what's been going on in your week. How's it all going?
So the big thing that I did this week is I spent a fair amount of time over the weekend playing the Diablo 4 closed beta. Did you get to put any fingers on it at all? Did you pre-order the game?
I did not pre-order the game, and I did not plan to play any Diablo 4 because I wanted to. I'm back on my bullshit, Mango. I'm playing StarCraft. So I was just like, you know what? I want to play StarCraft, and I played a ton of StarCraft this week. But yeah, I was looking at the Diablo 4 beta because I thought it was next week, right? Because when we were all talking about it, we were talking about, I think it's when the open beta is, right?
Yeah.
So
the closed beta was this weekend. You can get it either by pre-ordering the game or by buying a double down from KFC. And the classes available this weekend were Barbarian, Rogue, Sorcerer. So I played the Sorcerer and Rogue to level 5, just went through the opening part of it. And I played the Barbarian to about like level 22 or 23. I think I didn't quite hit the cap. That's because I had other things that I was doing with my time. But it's pretty solid. I will check it out again next weekend if, one, I can finish out my Barbarian, and two, if the two classes that were locked out were Necromancer and Druid, and I would like to put hands on Druid just because I'm pretty sure I'm going to play either Druid or Barbarian when the game goes live. But it was fun, very Diablo. I think it's already a vast kind of like improvement, at least from launch date from Diablo 3. You get a lot more kind of drops relatively early because you don't have the real money auction house thing happening, which was like crazy that like to think that was like a thing that they thought would work.
So to be clear, that's actually not true. One of the designers of Diablo 3 went on to talk about this, and it's funny because the moment I read this Twitter thread, I was like, this makes so much fucking sense. But what it was the drop weights were low because they expected people to farm, right? Like in Diablo 2, where you would farm bosses for like good drops. They expected people to just sit and kill those bosses kind of like over and over and over in order to get the drop rate. So they were kind of optimizing for the way that like veteran Diablo 2 players had optimized the game. And I can't remember who it was. It might be like Wyatt Chong, I think is his name, who's like a gameplay lead on Diablo 3 and would go on to be he's the cell phone. He went on to be the game director, I'm pretty sure, for Diablo But the thing that he explains in the thread, which I didn't think about this ever at all, right? But it makes so much sense, is he was like, the Real Money Auction House team was a completely different team. They were working on this and we didn't have access to that. So when we were setting drop rates for these items, we were pulling data and we were thinking about how players play Diablo 2 because the Real Money Auction House was just it was another department essentially
Right.
who was
Okay, that
working in
makes
a way
sense.
that we were not thinking about. And I was like, the moment I read that, I was like, oh my God, you're kind of right. That actually makes a lot of sense, right?
No, it does make sense, but it's also like in an alternate universe where like, Bobby Kotick comes down to like, the office and says you have to like decrease the drop rates to, like that's not a thing that's like unbelievable either, right? But like yes, I would totally
Yeah.
believe that like the reason that the drop rates were so abysmal initially was because they were expecting Diablo to use them. Anyway, point being is the drop rates much higher in at least the beta. I don't know if it'll be reflected in the final product, but some things that like that are very different is skills level up. Like each skill has like 5 levels to it, right? And you have points to assign, but like with like a little bit more frequency than I was expecting, items drop with +1 to skills fairly frequently, right? Like, and I like level 25 is half the cap, right? Like I like had like +1 to all like this, your skills are roughly grouped by like what slot they should go in, even though you're not restricted to that.
Right.
It's like +1 to all brawling skills or whatever, and I got a point in each brawling skill, and I could assign a skill that I hadn't put any points in, which was pretty neat. Yeah, so like I am excited because there's like 10,000 different types of itemization. There are elixirs, like WoW style elixirs that you craft out of like ingredients that you pull up off the ground. So I feel like they're optimizing for kind of like that long tail end grind, which I hope is fun because like historically my issue with Diablo 3 in its like post removal of the Real Money Auction House state was what was it? It was kind of like once I kind of like hit like the power curve in Diablo kind of like goes like it's like logarithmic almost, right? Like you get like a bunch of steep gains. Like with the seasons, it was like you fulfill the season thing, you get your season set, and at that point for me, it was kind of like I don't know anymore, right? Like I don't know if like I care enough to keep grinding for like marginal increases in power. And I would do that for a little while and then fall off of it. But it seems like there's enough kind of like levers to pull here that there'd be like gains that necessarily super significant, but enough that like you can be like you can kind of like chase a high of like like I want to get like plus bonuses to this skill set, and hopefully that'll be enough to keep me in for a while because it looks fun. Or like it was fun when I played of it. You can kind of like the first time you run dungeons, you get like essentially like a legendary affix that you can graft onto items. And you can also pull it out of like, for instance, I got one of the first, or one of the, I think it was actually the first legendary drop I got was a mace, that, had this effect that while you're berserking, you have fire going around you. Berserking is a specific thing you can do as a barbarian. Certain skills enable it. I changed my build to kind of like start berserking because I hadn't been doing it before that, and I thought that that's a good motivational gameplay. Eventually, I outgrew that that mace, but I really liked the effect, so I pulled the effect off of the mace. And I was able to put it on another mace, and it was but that particular affix wasn't even like available in the Codex of Powers that I could have fixed. That I could like, or rather, so there's this thing called the Codex of Power, which holds a number of affixes. Some are class specific, some are not. That can be grafted onto various items, legendary affixes, essentially. But not all of the affixes you can find can be put in the Codex of Power. Some of them have to be like pulled off as these individual items and reattached. And I thought that was a neat system, right? It lets you kind of like level some stuff off with you if like it's like a core to your build decision. But yeah, I had a great time with it. I didn't get to play any co-op really, other than kind of like open world, people are around type co-op. In some ways, it does kind of remind me of like it seems like with each game, the crossover between WoW and Diablo seems to get a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Which is in some ways good for me because like I like the animation in Diablo better because Diablo can be more free with its loot because it's like not as concerned with kind of like seasonal balance, right? Like
Yeah.
the game kind of I think wants you to break it, which is fun. So I had a good time with it. I would recommend everybody check out the open beta next weekend. Lou in the chat says that the KFC thing was a lie. I don't, I there must have been a way to get it that was I don't know. Friend of the cast Zhao ate a double down today, and and it was after the beta, and he said it was all right. So, Lou says that the KFC that the double down was bad. Have you ever had a double down, buddy?
Nope.
Neither have I.
I do not like KFC traditionally, so
I don't really eat much fast food.
That's also true. But like when it comes to fast food, I do have like I prefer Jack in the Box and Wendy's to like McDonald's and Burger King or whatever else, like that kind of a thing. And KFC is pretty far down the list. It's tough to get me to want to go to KFC over like Taco Bell or Wendy's or kind of any of those other ones.
Yeah. So, as a Jersey person, do you have feelings about White Castle?
I love White Castle in a nostalgic way. I haven't had White Castle in a long time because there are no White Castles
at Gen Con.
No, yeah, I haven't had it since we had it at Gen Con, which would have been like 2013, 2014, like that era of, the famous thing that you do with White Castle is you get a crave case and you eat the whole crave case. I've done that a couple of times when I was like a kid. I'm sure there's still cholesterol in my veins from that shit.
Yeah. I did that on my first spring break in college. I did that as on somebody bet me that that they would pay for it if I finished it. So I did, grabbed the $20 from him because I think that was the price at the time, and ran to the bathroom and vomited. And then I felt terrible for like a full day afterwards.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah. So how was your week? How was StarCraft?
How was my week? Yeah, so I've been playing StarCraft. So I've been playing StarCraft 1, though I have downloaded StarCraft 2. My new thing, I was like, I have StarCraft Remastered. I remember buying StarCraft Remastered because it's such a huge game in my life, right? Like one of the most foundational games I think I've ever played, right? I used to get in so much trouble because I would just play StarCraft for hours and hours and hours. I was so addicted to playing StarCraft. But I'm not doing anything competitive with the multiplayer or anything like that. I'm just literally replaying the campaign mission by mission by mission. And StarCraft Remastered is amazing. Actually, it's a really, really good remaster and like update to the game for like modern sort of situations. It's funny because like I haven't touched the game probably in 15 years, maybe longer, right? It's just been so long since I even got close to StarCraft 1. So I have these like echoes of what the graphics are like, right? And it's crazy how I know cognitively the remaster is a remaster and they have changed the sprites, or whatever. But how crazy it is that those changed sprites still like occupy the space in my brain, right? For instance, there's a thing that happens for Protoss pylons or any Protoss building. When you deal damage to a Protoss building directly to its health, it starts like phasing out, like warping out. And there's this effect where it's just streaming this like light blue energy or whatever. And I just like, I noticed that the animation plays faster now, right? That like the animation is probably playing in 60 frames a second, whereas the old one used to play in 30 frames per second or whatever. Because it's just different enough that I can like notice, but it's just like such a perfect representation of what this stuff is. It's funny because some of the moments in the story play out really well in ways that I had kind of forgotten about. New Gettysburg is the mission, kind of the pivotal mission of all StarCraft, where Sarah Kerrigan gets left behind by Arcturus Mengsk, and Jim Raynor is up in space, and he's yelling at her because he's abandoning her to be overwhelmed by the Zerg, right? They place a psi emitter on the planet, and then and then they say they're going to evac people, but they they just leave them to die and get overrun by the Zerg. And then Kerrigan gets abducted and put in this chrysalis that then becomes part of the Zerg campaign. You're like making sure the chrysalis works. And then Kerrigan kind of like comes back to life. But it's just like there's a lot of like little details in that which work in a way that I had kind of forgotten about. And I'm pretty sure they have re-recorded some of the voice lines, right? Kerrigan is not played by Trisha Helfer, who is the woman who plays Kerrigan in StarCraft 2, who I actually like quite a lot. I think that she's a very good, she just has a very good Kerrigan performance in that. But like, I'm pretty sure they re-recorded the StarCraft 2 Jim Raynor for the remastered Jim Raynor and the StarCraft 2 Mengsk for remastered Mengsk. But her voice is maybe still the original voice. I kind of can't quite tell. But it's just, I don't know. It's really something. I've never done this before with like playing a remaster of a game. I think a lot of people have in like other situations, right? Kind of going back and playing games that they played as a kid, and seeing what it was like. But like, this is the one that's like really, there for me. I have just destroyed the Protoss temple on Aiur. Oh, so the other thing I will mention, I was really bad at this game when I was younger. I don't know how I could have been this bad, but like, I have been absolutely stomping these maps, and I remember getting fucking owned by them. I remember thinking, I was like, I don't know how I can do this without cheats. I was like, I can't beat this without cheats. There are certain levels of the game that I didn't beat, even with cheats. I couldn't beat them, right? Because I never allowed myself to use like power overwhelming, right? You do certain, like, I was like, I'm willing to do Black Sheep Wall, which is permanent visibility. You can see the whole map. But I wasn't willing to do power overwhelming, which is God mode, right? And it's funny to me how, I guess, just like good strategy game fundamentals, I don't really know how else to put it. Like, good strategy game fundamentals just wins, right? You turtle up, you farm 1 million resources, and then I build a gazillion fucking Zerglings and I send them all in at once. And that, like, maybe it's that I just like didn't have a good sense for building, like, making guys when my economy was running, right? Like, something that I guess is like a StarCraft 2 thing that I picked up is this thing of I send my guys to go attack, and then I go back to my base and I set all of my buildings to make a new army, right? And then if my attack fucks up, that's fine. I have a new army ready and waiting to go. If my attack goes poorly, or if my attack goes well, I just send my second wave in and they blow everything up. Right. So I don't know. Maybe that's just like the Total War gamer in me has like, I don't know, all about where you grow up, man. Yeah, probably, I guess. I don't know. That's what Lou says in the chat. Oh, actually,
That
Lou's
was
probably talking about
Fast Food.
White Castle.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That you like, because like I definitely remember having those problems. Like as like I feel like a middle schooler, like having those problems, and that like I didn't really think about like unit composition, right? It was like I'm going to build a bunch of carriers, and that is going to win because they are the most expensive unit, and then they didn't. Right? It's like, oh, why would I make any Templars? I can just make Archons.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of like I was never great at like those kind of like what's the word, actions per minute, APM type RTSs.
Yeah.
RTSs, right? Like famously, I friend of the cast, Monic, used my account to try and race switch at some point in StarCraft 2, and he got my account to platinum. And I won one game by cannon rushing, and I was like, I'm going out on top. I can say I won a game in platinum, and never really went back because I also just like didn't have the like the way you have to play those games. Just like is not fun for me, right? Like I want to watch the armies fight, right? Like that's the fun part, right? And like you said, you go back to your buildings and you build stuff, and like in single player you can pause and all that, but I just like never found any of that super compelling. So I went and
Yeah, the other thing that I have been looking up is, have you ever heard of the game Foxhole?
no.
Okay, this Foxhole might be a trip. I watched this YouTube video. Okay, there's this game. It's called Foxhole. It was in early access for a long time. Foxhole is is an MMO where you are playing on one server, but like it is a literal war, kind of like a World War II
Yeah.
era war, right? But like instead of having like classes in a way, like it's not like you have sniper or you have you know, uh I don't know, what like medic or whatever. I guess they do have medics or whatever. They have like logistics, right? So like the idea is the two factions that are like warring back and forth in Foxhole, like even in territories that are fully owned by your side in the war, are are just like creating resources, and you have players whose whole gameplay is about building the factories to create the ammunition to put in the trucks that other factories are building to take those trucks to the front line where other players are like firing them basically. You have trains, you have trucks, you have mining operations, you have tanks, all these different kinds of tanks or whatever. And I'm just like, I have never wanted to play a game more than Foxhole, but I also haven't done it because I prefer I don't know. It came out in September of last year, out of early access into 1.0 in September of last year. And the famous thing that happened is that they had so many players on launch that they had to break apart into 3 realms, right? But what ended up happening was the 2 factions just started winning on one realm each, and they just put all their time and effort into that realm, where they just essentially were stomping. Kind of like how in World PvP and Classic WoW, you
went to servers where your side was favored.
Yeah, exactly. You went to servers where your side was favored, and you just don't even worry about it kind of like past that, right? I don't really know how I got to Foxhole from StarCraft 2, but I don't know. I wanted to ask if you'd seen it because I hadn't until I saw this YouTube video, and now I want to play it so fucking bad.
Well, it's on sale right now. And I've just bought it, so maybe I will
Oh my god. Yeah, because something that someone was talking about was regiment, right? Which is sort of like guilds in World of Warcraft. But you have these regiments, which is like a couple hundred people or whatever. And I feel like this must be like what EVE Online is like in a way. But like instead of EVE being this super persistent world, Foxhole resets once one faction wins the war. A new war is announced for like the server. By the way, they did eventually break down. The numbers came down so much that they consolidated everything into one. So apparently they have been it has been going back and forth in the Wardens and the Colonial. Anyway, that's my Foxhole journey. I really want to play this game now.
Interesting. Let's maybe I will install that later. No, it looks interesting.
I feel like this is a big fantasy that players have had for MMOs for the longest time.
Yeah, I mean it's a matter of getting it to work, right? Because like, the game I was following for a while, I can't remember the name of it. It's like the MMO that was made in Unity by a bunch of guys that were formerly on Dark Age of Camelot. Crowfall. That came out. I think it got like unreleased again, or kind of like put in maintenance mode. Just because. Crowfall has gone dark. And they're planning on going back up with it at some point, but they haven't updated their development channel. I played it for like a little bit while it was out. But that was kind of like the vision behind it too, right? Like realms that like lasted for like anywhere between 3 and 9 months, and you would fight, and then the realms would go through changes as they were like rising and falling, and then you'd have like things you could take out of the realms. But like the idea was that you'd play through like that things like you play a campaign to its conclusion, and you could jump back in, and it would be fun. And like it was very ambitious, but I guess it just didn't work out. You
Yeah,
know,
I am also reading about how
people,
Crowfall went dark in November of last year, and taking some time to figure shit out, I guess.
yeah, people were very mad about it in the community, um, because it was one of those like one of those things that got like an impossible amount of money, but you can't like not quite as much as like say Star Citizen, but you just can't necessarily run a game off of all that. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, Foxhole might be the actual dream then in this scenario. Because I think honestly, the idea of playing a logistics like the difference between frontline soldiers and logistics soldiers and like reconnaissance soldiers, the idea of playing a logistics soldier whose whole thing is just like creating really efficient factories in your safe territory, your back line, right? And shipping that to your front line, like that actually sounds really appealing for me. But it's just like I think the question is, how do you make that gameplay compelling? How do you make that fun, right? For instance, there was an MMO that I can't remember what was it called. um it was like Valiant MMO maybe. um Yeah, okay, so there was an MMO that came out called Valiant. And the idea was that the crafting systems were going to be as intense as the combat system, right? And for instance, instead of having a raid where you go and kill a boss, you might have a raid where you go and build a ship, right? Crafters would go and build a ship. They would have a crafting rotation, they would have crafting talents. You could level it up, which I sort of think, in a certain sense, Final Fantasy did this, right? Because they have those jobs that you level, the crafting jobs or whatever. um but yeah, so the idea was that like crafting was just as intense of a sort of like game mode as anything else. But it didn't go anywhere because it's just less fun to be doing your rotation by like building nails than it is to do your rotation by killing monsters, right? And I feel like that's the thing that has always sort of struggled, right? But in a world where you marry the kind of when I think of this, I think of this as like systems architecture,
you're
right?
right.
Like the systems architecture fun of making an optimized Factorio factory or Stardew Valley farm, right? You incorporate that in the back end, and then the front end you just have raw MMO mechanic like fighting. You and a bunch of guys are gonna go invade this town. It's full of bunkers, and you have to like blow up the enemy or whatever else, right? Like I feel like I don't know. That's yeah. Oh, New World also sort of went for this in a way.
New World basically abandoned all of kind of like that aspect of it in favor of being just like a kind of like normal MMO,
Yeah.
uh, which is kind of disappointing, but also like that makes sense. They
I don't
still are
actually
apparently
know.
producing content for New World because they do updates. I was while you were talking about that, I was looking at the Crowfall server. Apparently, Crowfall got acquired by Monumental, and the uh, the guy like one of the lead designer on Crowfall got laid off like back in January apparently. So yeah, crazy stuff. I guess that game's dead.
Wow. Yeah. That is kind of nuts. Yeah, what has been going on with New World?
I mean, I don't really watch the videos, but I'm still subscribed to their YouTube channel. Um, and so I see updates go by. It's like, new stuff in the
Update
tournament.
1.8. Holy fuck.
My guess is that just like Amazon still want to throw money at it. Maybe somebody at Amazon just forgot that like they exist, and like they're like, oh, we keep doing work. We'll
Yeah, I
keep.
mean they can put $1 billion into Lord of the Rings, right? Like
Yeah,
propping up a gameplay studio just with raw cash, and maybe you end up with, sort of a No Man's Sky situation.
yeah, maybe
Stranger things
right.
have happened.
And like New World was not bad. It just wasn't like super compelling, right? Um, like I could have seen a world where like if you and I and like Monik and other people had like really gotten into it and it kept playing it, I might still play that every once in a while, right? But like it's not like it's just like not enough, I guess. Yeah. Uh what else have I been doing? I've still been playing Marvel Snap. Marvel Snap has made me want to play. Marvel Snap combined with watching card market videos has made me want to play Magic again. Hopefully, we will have some opportunity to do that this week at PAX. Played a little bit of Guilty Gear Strive. Just kind of like trying to keep my fingers warm because when like there are two games that are coming out in June. They are Diablo 4 and Street Fighter 6, and between the two of them, I may never leave my house again. But and there's been more Zangief footage, and I'm hype. I'm so hype. So the thing that I can do now is play Potemkin, and so I've been playing some Potemkin. What else? I didn't watch anything compelling this week. No, the only thing of any real note that I watched this week, I think, was Shazam. There was something I was watching on YouTube that I thought was good, but I don't know if it's worth.
I've been watching so much YouTube, but it's just like all this dumb Destiny drama that is like I never understood reality television people until this moment. I am one of those people, part and parcel by now. Like,
yeah, I mean that's why I liked Great British Baking Show or Bake Off or whatever. I was telling you before the podcast that I watched Ristic Studios a couple of months ago did a video on Tarmogoyf and how its rise and fall, which I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah. Otherwise, I watch a lot of like woodworking videos, even though I don't do a lot of woodworking, or like tool videos. Yeah, I mean, I've been playing Lancer with some friends.
yeah, how's that going?
It's going well. It's like a super strong combat system. It's super neat. It's kind of like one of those make your own fun type things. And just kind of like it's about creative expression in a lot of ways through the combat, which I've been enjoying, and kind of also like our social encounters are very mechanical, just because the GM that is not his forte, and that is fine. But like it lets you make your own fun, right? Like I went over a character, like we had to like basically fill a wheel, right? You had to like pass enough checks to win the social encounter type thing. And one of my checks was like engaging like this person I need to convince in man-to-man harpoon combat, right? So that was super fucking fun.
Are you playing a version of Ralph?
I am.
Okay.
Call sign Blood and Thunder. Pilot.
That's such a long call sign. Aren't call signs supposed to be two syllables?
I don't
care.
And his mech is called, the first mech was called the Leviathan. His current mech is called the Ahab.
It's amazing. I have to say, did I tell you about my like shipwreck phase? Okay, I got obsessed with Titanic not that long ago. I watched it twice, basically back to back. I like watched it and then I was like, that didn't get it out of my system. I'm watching it again. And then so I spent 6 hours just like watching Titanic. This was a couple of weeks ago, right? And then I ended up watching one of those like real-time recreations of the sinking of the Titanic, because part of what makes Titanic so incredible is that it sank as slowly as possible, right? It actually would have been fine. I don't know if you know Titanic lore, but I will sit here and explain it to you.
Please, buddy, do.
Yeah. So when it hit the iceberg, it ruptured 5 watertight compartments. Titanic was actually designed such that if it hit 4 of those watertight compartments, it would have been fine, right?
It was supposed to be unsinkable, right?
Yeah, like, it had buoyancy. Yeah, it had the buoyancy to not sink if 4 of its watertight compartments were ruptured, right? Because the watertight compartments go up a certain amount, right? Go up above sea level, so the water comes up here, right? But the problem is what happened is the Titanic got 5, and the weight of the water draws the bow down enough so that the water starts spilling over the watertight bulkheads on the top, and it will eventually flood the entire ship kind of all the way down, right? this led me down this YouTube rabbit hole of like all of these specific things about the shipwreck of Titanic, right? Like about why it snapped in half, right? Which makes sense in like kind of an intuitive physics level. Like I remember learning this when I was a kid, because Titanic was huge, and my science teacher was like, "Oh well, if you think about it, right? Like you have all weight, and then it cracks, right?" But the actual specifics of that and how that worked are really interesting. The actual specifics of um, like the fact that it took 4 hours for the whole ship to sink, giving all of this time, right? This is why Titanic is such a good movie, because it lets all of this time for drama to play out, right? And then that took me to like other shipwreck like YouTube videos. So for instance, the USS Indianapolis. Do you know that story? It's the
No.
Jaws story. Okay, so the USS Indianapolis, which I think is the worst like maritime disaster of all time. It is the ship that is carrying the nuclear bomb to, I believe it was Okinawa, right? One of the air bases where they are going to load this thing onto the B-29 bomber and fly it over Hiroshima or Nagasaki, drop the bomb, right? Um, because it was carrying the nuclear weapon, it was ordered to go radio silent, right? Um, so it drops off the nuke. On its way back, it gets torpedoed by two Japanese subs. The torpedo like just strikes one of the fuel things. There's oil all over there's this huge oil slick all over the waves that catches fire or whatever. But the crazy thing is no one knows it's missing because the ship was ordered to go radio silent. So they only noticed that it was not back 3 days later, right? And the story, and this is why it's the Jaws story. And the story gets crazy because there are a bunch of dead people in the water. They're all bleeding, and sharks start showing up, right? And then for 3 days, you have these sailors who are in rafts. They're floating on wreckage, right? They're just like trying to stay alive. There's fire still burning all around them or whatever. And they are being picked off and eaten by tiger sharks, right? In, the Pacific Ocean. And boy, is that frightening.
Yeah.
Like a frightening thought. Anyway, so a lot of my YouTube is this super dumb interpersonal drama with Destiny, and a lot of my YouTube is shipwrecks and like ocean liners, all that other kind.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was under the impression that the Arizona was one of the worst disasters. The Arizona is the one that's like bombed in Pearl Harbor and like
Oh
sinks.
yeah, and it flips over. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, the guys are all inside, but they couldn't get him out, and they all
yeah,
drowned.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I also think it might technically be the Kursk. I don't know if you know about the Kursk. The Kursk is a Soviet a Soviet nuclear submarine. It was actually the biggest and most powerful nuclear submarine in the Soviet army. And during a naval exercise, a torpedo went off in front of the ship. And it exploded. But the Soviets were so everyone found out about it immediately, but they were so like image conscious that they didn't admit that an accident happened. And by the time they finally did admit, all of the sailors had drowned, and there's actually evidence that they actually survived in the tail. A good amount of sailors survived in the stern of the submarine at the bottom of the sea. They could have been rescued if they had like done so in time, but instead the kind of the Soviet propaganda machine let them drown. It's real fucked up.
So speaking of communists being terrible, um, this actually reminded me of this. Is I've been reading The Three Body Problem.
What's the three body problem?
It is a
Like,
science fiction novel by a Chinese author that was translated into English in 2012. There's a Netflix series coming out this year that's an adaptation of it. Um, it's but it opens. So apparently, when it was initially being written, it was serialized, and the part that's the opening in the English version is like in the middle of the Chinese version, kind of because like it needed to get popular before, because the opening scene is a literal Mau Mau session, right? Like the father of one of the primary characters is being put on like essentially a show trial. He's being Mau Mau'd for counter revolutionary activity for teaching physics, because physics is like physics is like from the decadent West, and you have to reject that and embrace communism, right? It's like a kind of like very brutal, kind of like showing of like communist era China, and the character that is being memoed refuses to say, like, he's like, do you admit to like spreading false Western propaganda? He's like, no, this is like real. This physics is like real, and these are facts of the universe. And he is like beaten to death in front of his daughter, who is like the main character for that section of the book. At some point, it jumps to the present day. She enters the story a little bit later. Our main character in the present day is a nanomaterial scientist who is like caught up in this thing where like several prominent researchers have committed suicide, and like he gets called into like basically a battle command station that involves the People's Liberation Army and CIA operatives and people, and like someone from Britain as well. And so it's like something big is happening, and I haven't quite gotten to the part of what it is. There's a lot in there, but it has been captivating so far. The 3-body problem is like a famous physics problem. It's also in universe. There's like a video game that has like a VR suit that like can like impart like feelings to your body, kind of like a Ready Player One style suit. But in the game, it's like civilization. It's the game is essentially civilization tries to advance itself to end state, but like without like with days being essentially, there's like periods of chaos and periods of stability, and during periods of chaos, days don't happen at regular cycles, and like they could burn you up or whatever. And the whole objective of the game seems to be to figure out what the cycle of chaos and stability is, because if you can solve that problem, then you can like advance civilization during a period of stability, and they have a way to like keep people safe during periods of chaos. It's a very interesting book, and hopefully I will have more to say about it in a week or so when I finish it. But it's been good. There is a character. I don't wanna. It's like Dashi is his nickname, which means like Big She. And he's like a rough and tough. He's like a cop that appears to be a shitbag, but is actually like very observational. He's probably my favorite character at this point, because he's like the shithead that actually knows, like like the diamond in the rough type guy. Kind of a shithead, but like has enough powers of observation that can be like it's essentially one of the plot points is like the scientist is like beset by something that's like making him go crazy, and like he's like and it's like appears to violate several like fundamental physical principles of the universe, and he's starting to go nuts. And then like this character is like, look, I've been looking at this for a while, and I'm pretty sure someone is behind it, and like don't let yourself get wrapped up in this, because there's like I forget the exact wording, but he's like, I've got a rule: if things are weird, that means that like things being weird mean that someone's behind it, not that like the whole world's coming crashing down. 3-body problem is referenced in actually, which makes sense. But yeah, no, I've been hearing about it for a while, and so it is actually on a podcast I listened to, Alienating the Audience. They talked about it, so I'm reading the book so I can listen to the podcast episode. So, yeah, I would recommend what I've read of it so far. I'm listening to it on tape. So,
okay,
yeah.
All right, well, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weird thing, I have also been reading a book, haphazardly, communist, the famous book of The End of History. This book actually gets
Frank Fukuyama. Yeah.
This book gets clowned on so much. People always make fun of this book, but I actually find it really compelling. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like I don't know. Honestly, the more I do this, the more I realize just like my whole world is a lie, right? It's like one of those things where like somebody reads a headline, comes radically bad conclusion about it, and then like makes fun of it. But like if they were actually to have read the article,
I've heard this as well. that like
Yeah,
the end of history, like it was like, oh, I guess history didn't end there, Frank Fukuyama. And
yeah,
that's like
because
not
the
actually
point is that he's referencing the thing that Karl Marx said, which is that, like humans are naturally progressive. This is something I've always believed. Humans are naturally progressive. They build on, kind of past knowledge. We use our repositories of knowledge in order to jumpstart the knowledge of future generations, right? Such that like kids in kindergarten are like learning principles of math that took, however many hundreds and thousands of years to kind of like coalesce or whatever. And Karl Marx said that socialism was going to be the end of history. It was going to be the perfect form of government that the world was going to sort of end up at, right? And what Francis Fukuyama is basically saying is, no, actually, it's liberal democracies. Get fucked. Like, he's actually, to be honest with you, he's not even mean about it, right? He's just making a demonstrable point, right?
Yeah.
Which is that, yes, this is true. This is a thing that has happened. The collapse of the Soviet Union means that really there's no other kind of governmental challenger to the archetypal framework of the liberal democracy typified in the American and French revolutions, the late 1700s. So and it's just like that, it's frankly wild to me reading this book, given sort of like that context, because it came out 30 years ago. So
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of stuff in that kind of vein. Yeah. Oh man, this reminds me of, so ChatGPT 4 is out. I don't know if the one that's on the ChatGPT website is actually ChatGPT 4 if you have to like get super access. But because that came out, I went to ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, why is communism when no food? And it actually understood what I was asking.
Really?
Yeah. It was like, while communism is often associated with food shortages, and it gave me like first it like thought for like a good minute, right? And I was like laughing because I was like, it's trying to figure, and it like gives me like a page-long explanation of like how things have happened, but like not out, it's not necessarily communism's fault, like this is like a whole kind of explanation. It was funny to me because like if you just kind of like read it on face, it was kind of like left-wing meme status type deal, right? Like but like it did a good job, right? Like the future's here, guys, right? Like
that's it. It's frightening, I guess.
Yeah,
so my grandfather was a linguist, right? He was a linguist. Very, his whole thing was, he translated the sort of indigenous. It's a little bit of a Creole, the indigenous language of this group of people who lived in the mountains of Peru called the Quechua. He translated their language into Spanish, right? And made the first kind of like Quechua Spanish dictionary so that they could, kind of like you could have talks sort of like back and forth, because for a long time they were essentially using like a Creole of the Quechua language that incorporated a lot of Spanish loan words, basically. And one of the things that he did is he made the very first computer program called WinSalsa. There was a Spanish English dictionary, right, where you could, I'm sure I could do this, like Google Translate is essentially this sort of eventual brainchild of this, but you could pay my grandfather $20 and you would get a program on your machine and you would type in whatever dog and you would get pedal, that kind of. And I once asked him that question. I was like, could I use this to like translate in the Google Translate way, right? Could I use this to like translate a sentence? And he said I remember him saying at the time, he's like, no, you can't do that, because computers can't think in the way that humans think about language. And he kind of was talking about how the language is a inherently like insanely complex things that our brains are particularly, this is actually like Noam Chomsky's, right? Human brains are particularly built to create and understand language in really complex ways, in the ways that people don't realize are that complex, right? So for instance, our ability to create antecedents and pronouns, and refer to certain to certain objects by different words, but like communicating that to like a computer. He was like, he told you, he's like, I don't think a computer could ever do this, which obviously he was wrong. I mean, he was whatever, a
I-
70-year-old man in the 90s, right? Like computers were not built for this. But
you know what's really funny? That stuff you're talking about, that was like, I didn't do anything directly with it, but like, um, one of the leading researchers in, or two, several, many of the leading researchers in the field were in the computer science department at our alma mater. Um,
really,
yeah, like Jay Sneisner, I took an NLP class with him. Um, he like when I was like a freshman, he was talking about how, like, basically the stuff you were talking about, right? Is like, um, the I like, you know, like the construction of typhoid Mary as a thing that we understand is like a thing that's like really hard to describe to a computer, right? Like, because you could say, like, chainsaw Tom and mean it in the same sense, right? But you need, like, the context for it, and we can like intuitively get that, but like computers really can't.
yeah.
Um and even now, right? Like the big question with ChatGPT, right, is like, is like is it doing a fun trick, or is that what human is like? Are humans just like a bag of fun tricks, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because there's a lot of this stuff. I mean, this is also something that you know, like my dad, when he was riding a bike, he got hit by a car, and one of the things is like it has dramatically altered the way that he can do things, like it's almost like he had a stroke in a way. Like hold a conversation while doing something with, right? Like he can't possibly do that anymore. Just because like the part in his brain that was built for this just is like kind of gone. And there's like a lot of like interactions around that where there are these like silent automatic things that our brains do that we don't even glance at, right? um that we sort of take for granted, right? This is also like the Boston Dynamics people talked about this, like the process of human balance is really insane and complicated, right? How the automatic functions of our inner ear work to create balance was like the thing that was the big hurdle to creating real robots, which is why they put out those videos of robots doing these insane jump tricks and all this other stuff now, because they have by this point mathed it out.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very cool. Like, it's all, we it's what was it? Somebody I was reading recently was like, you know, we might be at like the bottom of like a very steep curve that's going to take off anytime soon, or we might not be, but we can't tell until we're there, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, which would be
Yeah, I
insane.
have game designer friends who are not afraid of GPT at all, because their thing is like is they essentially is like the illusion, right? Like in Chat GPT is a very advanced version of Mass Effect dialogue tree, is sort of the underlying thought there. Um where it itself is not thinking, it is like collating data that is being fed to it, and it is just such huge mounds of data that there's not actually thought happening there. It is just assembling words in the way that you want them to be, that you want them to be assembled, which I don't know that I believe that. I don't know that I buy that framing of. But technically speaking, I understand the principle that they're sort of outlining, that
Yeah.
ChatGPT is not demonstrating real true intelligence, right? It is just orders. It is working at such insane orders of magnitude of data, right? That it can look real close.
Yeah, no, I mean, the kind of formal way it works is it predicts the most likely kind of next set of words and like spits them out with some variance, some randomness put in there. Um, and part of the question is like, at at some point, how much of that is like what we do, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I mean, I'd say for a while, at least next, like, I might eat my words on this, right? But like, I would say for a little while, like the purely creative endeavors, right? Like this is the thing with like AI art, right? Like, I think AI art is cool because it allows me, who has no artistic talent, to like generate something that's like vaguely beautiful with like good prompt engineering, right? But like, prompt engineering is still a skill you need at some level, and
Mhm.
like, um, that's going to be a thing, I think, for at least a little while. Um, and it's just kind of like another tool in the toolbox, right? Like game designers, I think, are pretty good for a little while, but like I think that like I, as a software developer, I think that there's like rapidly we're coming to a point where like, yeah, like let me make sure I can. Let me think about this. So I will talk about ChatGPT because I can be sure that I won't give away anything that way. You can ask ChatGPT to write code for you, and it will write mostly correct code for you. And there are ways to integrate that kind of stuff with other tools that like might make my job redundant at some point. Because at some level you need the understanding to kind of understand what it gets wrong, but at some point it'll stop getting things wrong, right?
Yeah.
And the other big stuff here is like kind of like workaday things that like contract law and like doctors, right? Like general practitioners. These things are coming for those people, right? Because like it's like a lot of rote stuff that like you can have a machine do. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, it is nuts. I do know what that's like for game design, because one of the engineers that we work with is really into AI, like integrating AI and how our engineers work. I don't know the specifics of it, but I just know that this is like his thing is this is a really powerful tool that is sort of like a force multiplier, right? Like
Yeah.
one engineer can make more code by smart use of AI, basically, which is true, right? We're a company, 40 people, not a lot of engineers, have to do a lot of coding. Being able to use AI to your advantage like that's really powerful. Oh God, that's weird. It's weird to think about.
Hold on. Okay, so I have found an article that talks about some of this stuff. There's this idea of machine learning enhanced code completion. I have used some of it. It is great. It is not enough to take away my job yet, but like you can see where that goes, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's nuts. We're living in the future, buddy. Soon we could already, right, like feed our back catalog into like a voice thing and have it talk like us, and it'll sound kind of like you would tell it was a robot, but like if you wanted to have like Buddy and Mango like read your audiobook for you, right? Like you could probably do that. We've got enough data out there that's publicly available.
Yeah, that's true. Have you? There was a while where I got sucked down the rabbit hole of. Actually, you probably heard this. Have you ever heard me refer to Dave in Raid as a sad apustaya?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is
Oh,
a
yeah.
reference to that's a reference to the AI generated presidential debate from 2023 where like Donald Trump is calling Joe Biden cringe and Joe Biden is like, "Actually, I'm the Giga Chad. You are cringe." Like and like those
meme
memes
now,
are
right?
insanely funny. Yeah.
Right? Like Obama, Trump, and Biden play video games together, right? Like
Yeah, the have you seen the WoW version of
I
the
have not
WoW
seen the
version
WoW
of that?
one.
It is very funny. It's Mythic Plus focused, so you might not get it as much as like one that's like more focused on raid, but it's just like it's very funny. But yeah, like it's weird that AI generated are a meme.
Yeah, no, I mean it's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, and that one streamer, I remember this drama was pretty funny. Like the streamer who had to apologize because he was watching AI porn of other
Those
streamers.
yeah.
Yeah. Like streamers he was friends with, and everybody was big mad about it.
Yeah. No, I mean
Uh
that's man, that's like its own thing too, right? Like cuz that's like deep faking type stuff, which is like
yeah.
been a thing that's been like on the horizon, right? Like um yeah, I don't know. Man. All right, well,
Future, as
yeah.
Squidward famously said.
If you would like to email us about the future, you can email us at submergedplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@submergedplaygames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/submergedplaygames or youtube.com/@submergedplaygames. I should probably disclose here that I am employed by Google, so I do not work on YouTube, but obviously that in some indirect way helps me. Um, uh, Rate, review us on iTunes wherever you find podcasts. That's everything I have. But do you have anything you're looking to promote?
PAX. Yeah, I'm
Oh
we're
yeah,
gonna be at PAX Akupara. We have 5 games that we're showing off, 3 of which have been announced, 2 of which we're announcing kind of on the day. So if you're Kona PAX, come hang out with us. The big thing that we're doing is this thing called the Akupara Paxport, which is a like a raffle thing sort of that we're doing every day. So players who come by and they play our games, they kind of get a raffle ticket essentially, and then come back to the booth at the end of the day, and we'll do prizes. I am lugging all of those prizes from Los Angeles, so please appreciate them, because fuck me, it is making my travel nightmarish.
yep. I will be at PAX too, not in any official capacity anyway. But if you see me and you want to say hi, because we have so many adoring fans, feel free to say hi. I will probably be at some point around the Akupara booth because I want to say hi to Buddy, my good friend that I haven't seen in person in. Oh, I guess I saw you last year, but still
That's
been
true.
a while.
Yeah, not in a while.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, with that, I will say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.